I am Coach Pamsky. I work with women who are coming from dysfunctional situations and homes, and I help them overcome the effects of being in those situations. So I talk a lot about boundaries and how to deal with anger. How do you trust again? What do you need to do to build your self-worth and overcome imposter syndrome? And so I am the owner of Pamsky's Place, which is a life learning center for women who are coming out of these situations. And I promote the 6 pillars of self-care with Christian values. So Debbie, can you introduce yourself?
Sure. Well, good morning, everyone. So my name is Debbie Dowling-Wahba. I am the owner of Anxiously Overcoming, where I help women to ditch the anxiety and stress and get back to doing the things they love. And why I got involved with this is because I have had anxiety for most of the adult life that I've been living, and I just wanted to be that person that I wish I had. So I have a strong passion about helping other women, and also just the stigma around the discussion of mental health. I think it's so important that we open up these conversations. So back to you, Pam.
So good. So good. I love that we both have that. I mean, I hate to say that we had to go through some tough things, but definitely helps us to be able to help other women. And I just heard it the other day that people really want people who understand, who have been through it, who have the experience, who knows what it feels like to go through some of these things. And not just that, because empathy is great. We need people to empathize with us, but usually the best people to empathize with us are the people who have been through some of the things that we're going through, and they can say, "Hey, this is what worked for me."
Yeah.
And though everyone's different, sometimes if you try some of the things that other people have done that's helped them be successful or work through things, you find that it actually works for you too.
Yes. And
So
that people
Debbie,
don't realize that, what works for you may not work for me, but at least if I have that idea and I can try, you never know what the outcome is going to be. So it's important that we just get the education and try.
absolutely. And you know that saying, you don't know unless you try. Like if you don't try, you're never going to know.
Right.
Yes, yes. So what I want to say to you all who are watching either the recording of this or you're here live, please make sure that you put comments in so that if you have a question, if you have something you'd like to say, if you got some great points you would like to make, if there's something you would like to see us do, because we're doing this every week and we are going to bring you value. Debbie and I are very big about bringing value in everything we do. And so we're going to give you steps, tools, tricks, information. But if there's a topic that you would like us to talk about, please put it in the comment, because we do check the comments. We come back and we'll answer your questions and we'll look at what you have to say. With that said, today we're going to talk about the 6 profiles of imposter syndrome. Now, we mentioned a few in last week, but we're going to go through all of them because I had the question, what are all 6 of them? Before we get started, I do want you to know that I do have a quiz or assessment that you can take. It's only 7 questions that will help you identify what your imposter profile is, because you can't do anything about something if you don't know what's going on. But listen to this. If this is the recording for you, listen to this, because we're going to go through all 6 of them and I'm going to give you highlights of each one. We're going to talk a little bit. Debbie and I are going to talk a little bit, and then we're going to come back and we're going to talk about, okay, well, let's pick one thing that someone's struggling with in each one, and what can you do about it? Because I want you guys to be able to leave with some tools, with something that you can do. So let's get started. All right. So the first one we're going to talk about is perfectionist. So the perfectionist they're overly critical of themselves. Like when they do things, they are just overly critical. They fear failure. They don't they don't want, like, if they fail, it's a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
And they won't even do some things because they're afraid they're going to fail. How sad is that? They overwork. They're the ones that work late. They continue to work. And, actually, sometimes they're putting in the hours, but they're doing more than what's necessary. Okay. They're doing way more than that's necessary. And why did they do this? Because they're trying to make sure that they, first of all, it's how people perceive them, but also how they perceive themselves. And if they can't get it to be perfect, then it really frustrates them. They also have difficulty delegating. They fear that if they give someone a task, that it will take away from themselves. You know what I mean? Like
Yes.
they want, we talked about this before, that they want the task to be perfect because it makes them feel good, because other people will see it and say, "Oh, what a great job you did." And that feeds their ego.
Hmm.
And so if they have someone else do the task, well, guess what happens? They don't get that value, that cup filled.
Right.
And so, that's something that really is difficult for them. So Debbie, just in those four, did I mention four? Yes. Just in those four, which one do you think most people, because actually the perfectionist is the one, I said this last week, I'll say it again in my quiz, this is the big one. Like this is the one that keeps coming up the most. All those four things: overly critical of themselves, fear of failure, overworking, and difficulty delegating. Which one do you think stands out the most?
I know for myself personally, I go between the perfectionist and the delegation,
Mm.
because I feel like if I'm going to do something, I want it to be perfect and to my standards and to what I think is perfect. And it may not be perfect, but in my mind, that's what's perfect. And I also have difficulty delegating. I tend to do things and just by myself because it's easier, and rather than delegate out. And I have to learn to delegate because there are things that I don't need to be doing and others can do. And it just has to be something that I grow in, and I learn to do better. But yeah, definitely the perfectionist.
Absolutely. Yeah, I get it too. You will find as you listen to these profiles, you may find that you have a little bit of each. And yes, you may have a little bit of each because certain ones will show up at certain times. And so, different situations you're in, you may find yourself relating to some of these. But
Yes.
I'm with you too. I'm not very good at delegating. I'm trying to get better at that. um, I have this, and I really have to ask myself, is it because of perfectionism or is it because of professionalism? Which there is a difference for me. You can be professional and it not have to be perfect.
Right.
And so there's some things that I have a really hard delegating because I want it to be professional looking. And when you're talking about certain things in your business, it's hard to find people who actually are professional about it or will make it look professional. And so for me, but I can take it way too far. If I see something, uh, just an example. This is a really good example, and maybe some of you can relate to this. So, and you don't have to be in business for this to apply, although I may use business to do it. So, I have if I'm doing an image for something that I'm going to advertise for an event I'm going to have or whatever it is, if I see that it's not centered and I'm going along and I'm doing some other things and I see it, I will go back, delete that picture because it may not be in a format that I'm able just to easily fix it. And I'll redo that picture to get it in the middle.
Yes.
And it's who cares? I do because I see it and it bothers me.
Right.
So if you can relate to that, just know you got good company because I do that. And I'm trying more and more to say, Pam, back off. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be, and it's hard for me sometimes, but it's that reminding yourself. So before we get into the next imposter profile, the other thing I want to say about perfectionism as a imposter profile is that they often experience low self-esteem or low self-confidence. They're usually emotionally exhausted, no
Mhm.
kidding, right?
Yeah.
And they overemphasize an external validation. They need people to validate them. So,
Mhm.
this is some of the struggles that they have. And if you can relate, just know, like I said in my quiz, a good portion of the people who do the quiz end up being the perfectionist.
And one thing that I'm learning, not to be a perfectionist because done is better than perfect. So
Oh,
instead of stopping and not doing the things, I'm doing the things. And if they're not perfect, then I just tweak them along the way to make them better for what I'm trying to accomplish.
absolutely, absolutely. And the thing about that is when it says being exhausted, it's not kidding. Like I don't know about you, but I have been so exhausted from trying to keep all my T's crossed and I's dotted and have it a certain way. And it's like, Pam, stop.
It's mentally draining. It
It is.
mentally exhausts you.
It
So,
is. It is. And then you can fret.
yes,
You can fret over it because it's like, okay, what are other people going to think about it? Or, your boss or, your mother-in-law, whoever it is, what are they going to say about? So you can obsess over it and yes, be very exhausted. So the next one is the superhero. So the superhero overcompensates.
hmm,
They push themselves to work hard, probably harder than anybody else, just to prove that they're not an imposter. Like do you see what happens here? A lot of times we care about what people think.
yes.
And so in the superhero, this is about I will work myself to the bone because I want you to think I'm good, that I'm the superhero. Now, we don't actually do it with that thought in our head, most of us. Most of us do this subconsciously, and we don't recognize this is what we're doing until we start becoming very honest with ourselves. Right, Debbie?
Yes.
Boy, I tell you, we talk about this a lot. You have to be honest with yourself. You have to stop walking through life with blinders on. Take them off and let's really look at this. Why are you doing what you're doing?
Hmm.
Why are you doing? What is your motive? Why are you doing it? And you really need to look at what is causing you to do this. Like, what motive do you have? And if you're honest with yourself and say, well, I actually really did it because I just wanted people to like me. Hmm, yeah, I got to be careful of that. I've been there, and that's a hard one. Workaholism, work, 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 work. Stress and burned out for sure.
Yes.
High stress, high stress. And Debbie can tell you all about stress and what it does to your body and how bad it is and how, how to alleviate some of that stress
Yeah.
because she's all about anxiety, stress, and let's have a less stressful life.
Yes.
And Debbie, what do you want to say just in this part here? Like why do you think stress is so high in a superhero?
I think because they're just trying to do too much and they just, again, going back to the not delegating anything. So they have to be the hero that comes in and does everything. And they may not get the recognition and they may not get what they want from that or the, attaboy, attagirl. And what they're not realizing is they're stressing themselves out. They're not getting the accolades that they believe that they deserve because they're being the superhero, which then leads to resentment and anger.
Oh, girlfriend. Oh, you hit it hard. You hit it hard. Yes. That is so true. That one's out of the park. And it's true. And that stress and that resentment, that bitterness, boy, it can eat you up. It's a poison that will eat you up from the
Yes.
inside out. And if you don't take care of that bitterness and resentment, I had a lady one time for a whole year. She thought she didn't have any resentment, and I could clearly see it. But people have to come to that themselves. Like you
Yes.
can try to point it out for them, but they have to come to it for themselves. And finally, after a year, she said, "Remember when you asked me if I have resentment?" And I said, "No." I said, "Yes." She said, "Oh man, do I have resentment?" And I have a whole forgiveness program that I take people through. I actually do forgiveness weekends where one person, one woman will come to my home and we will spend the whole weekend working on forgiveness. And this is why, because it will eat you up, it steals from you, and you can't have joy like you should have when you have resentment. Good point, Debbie. Love that.
And I think that I find with most people, including myself, it was easier for me to forgive others than it was for me to forgive myself. We are so hard on ourselves with everything, and the criticism of ourselves, the forgiveness of ourselves, just everything. We are so hard on ourselves, and even when you're not living up to what you believe you should be, you need to look at yourself. And that's the hardest person to face is yourself, regardless of any situation. The hardest person to face is yourself, and to be honest with yourself.
Absolutely. And I think that if we could take care of the resentment that we have towards ourselves, the mistakes that we made, the things that we feel shame over, if we could take care of those things first, it's amazing how much then we can forgive other people because we experience that grace and that mercy, pouring it on ourselves, being kind to ourselves, and allowing ourselves off the hook. Like
Right.
we punish ourselves for the things that either we've done or we feel like we've done. And we walk around with this lower level of anxiety and depression. And if we would just forgive ourselves, learn to have that process, and it's not easy, but it is essential.
Yeah. And when you fly, what's the first thing they tell you to do?
Oh, yes.
Put on
Gotta
your the oxygen mask on yourself first, and there's a
That's
reason
right.
for that.
That's right. Absolutely. So we've got relationship strains, definitely for the superhero. Their relationships are, very strained because they're so busy working. They're so busy trying to get people's approval or making people think that they're great that they're not looking at how it's affecting their relationships.
Yes.
Validation through overworking. Again, here we see it again. Avoidance of leisure, like they don't take any leisure time, no self care. Uh oh, there it is. I knew it was going to show up. You have to practice self care. You deserve it. It is not selfish to have some self care and practice it. And I say this a lot, but it's not just a bubble bath, it's the six pillars of self care. You got to take care of yourself mentally, spiritually, physically, emotionally, financially. You
Mhm.
have to take care of those parts of you because if you don't, nobody else is going to do it for you. So get up and start practicing the self care.
Yeah. And I think a lot of women make the mistake of thinking that self-care has to be a massage or getting your nails done or taking that bubble bath. But it could be crafting. If you like to
Oh,
craft,
yes.
craft. It could be if you like to knit. I mean, there's so many hobbies that you could do, and if you're doing something you love as a hobby, it's self-care. I do a few things that for me are I love doing them. They're hobbies, but that's my self-care time because I know I'm focused and I'm doing something that I enjoy doing, and it takes me away from the chaos and puts me back in a good mood and aligned with myself because I know that while I'm doing these crafts, and when they're done, they turn out beautiful, and then I have something else to be proud of, but it was also a part of my self-care.
Absolutely, absolutely. And even on top of that, some people do not recognize that having boundaries is a part of self-care.
Yes.
Mentally doing things that nourish your mind is self-care. If you read self-care or self what do I want to say?
Development.
Yeah, thank you.
Development.
Self development books. If you read self development books, if you get into scripture, that's spiritual self care.
Hmm.
There are different things that you can do that feed and make your mind healthy, make your heart healthy.
Yeah.
There are more leisure things that you can do, like Debbie's talking about, just fun things. When's the last time you did something fun, something you really, really want to do that you've been putting it off? I'm going to say this. We all have the same 24 hours.
Hmm.
It's what you do with those 24 hours. You get to choose what you're going to do in those 24 hours. And you might
Yes.
say, but Pam, I've got 6 kids. I've got a job. I've got this. I've got a husband. I've got my mother's ill. I need to take care of her. Yes, you're right. You wear a lot of hats. But the truth is that you have to take time out for yourself because you're not going to be good for anybody else if you don't take care of yourself.
Yeah. And I could tell you that I'm not a very big TV watcher and I'm definitely not a movie watcher, but the one movie I could watch over and over and over, and I actually just watched it the other day, was Pretty Woman.
Oh, yeah, I
And you
love
know what?
that movie.
Yes.
Love that movie.
And it's because, she basically had such a low thought of herself. And she went
Mm,
from being a hooker and then being with this guy and seeing the different side of life and then starting to gain that confidence. In the end, she winds up with this amazing opportunity in life, and he saw in her what she didn't see in herself yet, and by the
yes.
end she sees it.
Yes.
And that movie has just, I don't know, especially when I'm having a lot of that self-doubt, I turn to that movie because I see how she grew from not having the confidence and not feeling like she was good enough to basically saying, I am that good.
Yes. One of my most favorite part of this whole movie, and I've referred to it many times when I'm working with women because it just hits home, is, and I know you know this, Debbie. So one of the parts of Pretty Woman that I absolutely love is when the reporter says to her, "You don't even know what kind of eggs you like." And she says, "Yes, I do." And then she realizes that all the different eggs that she said she likes has been according to the guy she was with. So she really didn't know herself very well. And she didn't know what kind of eggs she likes. So what did she do? She goes on this journey of, well, what kind of eggs do I really like? And she made every kind of egg you can ever think of. And she discovered she loves eggs Benedict. And
Yes.
so she was able to say to this man, I know what kind of eggs I like. This is later. She says to him, I know what kind of eggs I like. I like eggs Benedict. And how did she find that out? Because she went on that journey of
Hmm.
self discovery. And that's what we need to do. Yes, we may have these imposter syndrome profiles, but they're not our identity. I'm really big about not putting labels on ourselves. But the truth about the matter is that we have to take time out to discover
Yes.
ourselves. What do we like? What do we dislike? What triggers us? What makes us happy? What makes us angry? What makes us sad? What is going on inside us? Why do what motivates us? We need to I didn't even know what songs I liked. The songs I thought I liked was because my children were growing up. They would listen to different types of music. My husband would listen to different types of music, and when they get in the car, they'd all turn on their music. And when they all left the nest, it was like, what kind of music do I actually like? So I had to go on a journey and learn, what colors do I like? And we'll talk about this more next week,
Hmm.
but because we're going to talk about moms next week. So make sure you tune in.
Yeah,
It's going
that's
to
gonna be a
be
good one.
good. It's going to be good.
And I can tell you, like not knowing about what you like, for me, yes, the whole music, what they'd listen to, but I knew what I didn't like. But
Yes. Oh, yeah.
I was afraid to say turn it off or change the song, or unless it was vulgar, then I was like, But it's hard, and it's when we get into this next week when you're a mom about getting into all that stuff. But and the movie you were actually talking about was Runaway Bride. I was talking about Pretty Woman. Eggs is in,
Oh, that's right. That's right. It is Runaway
but
Bride.
it's still kind of the same, along the same thing, where
It
you
is.
didn't know who she was, and throughout this movie she figures out who she is, and she winds up being so confident in herself that she's able to say, this is what I want.
That's right. Yes. Yes, that's right. Runaway Bride is such a good movie. Yeah,
Yes.
they both are. All right. So let's move through this because I want to make sure that we get at least through all 6 of these.
Yes.
So, um they also externalize success. And what that means is they might not think others are just as capable, but or they may think they're capable, but just work less.
Hmm.
Like, they really value working, putting hours in because they're the hero.
Hmm.
So, all right, now the natural genius. So the natural genius uses they're they're used to things being easy for them. So when things start to get hard for them, if they have a challenge or they don't know something, it really upsets them.
Yes.
Really upsets them. They want they usually learn things quickly, and when they don't, they start internalizing what is wrong with me. When in fact, the truth is that not everything comes easy for everybody. Everybody has an area in their life where they're learning about something and it might take a bit more for them to learn it.
Yes.
But for the natural genius, that's a big no. They avoid challenges. Why? Because if they're challenged, it's going to look like it's hard for them. And they don't want that.
Because
Goes
they might
against,
fail.
they might fail. That's exactly right. They're hesitant to start difficult tasks. Matter of fact, if you ask them to do a difficult task, they'll probably turn you down because if they don't think they can do it, they will not do it. They won't rely on the fact that God might provide everything that you need to do that task. Instead, they just flat plain out say no, and
Hmm.
then they might miss out on some awesome opportunities or
Right.
doors opening on down the road. They also are frustrated with slow progress. They like things
Mm.
quick. Come on now, quick, quick, quick. Let's get this done. Yeah, it's got to be
And I
quick.
think that's a lot in society today. Everybody wants instant gratification. And what they don't realize is that anything you're working towards is not going to happen instantly. It's those little steps that you're taking that are getting you there. And you just have to have some patience, because if you take those little steps and you do a little every day, you're going to get to where you need to be. But again, we live in a world of self gratification and instant gratification. So we want to be able to have everything one, two, three. And it's not that simple.
We live in a microwave world. We want
Yes.
things quick, like we can get in the microwave. And
And
I can tell
easy.
you, so in a healing process, a lot of times it takes time. And often when I'm working with women, they get to a point where they get a little frustrated because they feel like I've been doing this for a little while now. Why am I not seeing the changes? And it's not that things aren't changing, it's just that it's a process and the journey takes a while. And sometimes you're too close to it. And it takes a little bit more growth for you to be able to see where you're at. And this is why it's really important to have a coach, a mentor, somebody with you who can pick out and say, they can point out, look how much you've actually grown. Because for the person, we've been in it for a very long time. And if we think that it's going to change instantaneously,
It
Well, look
does.
how long it took to get there.
Yeah.
Sometimes it just takes time. So be patient with yourself. Make sure that you have a coach or a mentor to help you so that they can cheer you on and point out how much progress you're actually making until you can actually start seeing it for yourself.
Yeah, and they know, you know how they say you shouldn't look in the rear view mirror because you're not going that way? Well, you know what? I look in the rear view mirror to see where I've come from.
Absolutely. I often tell my clients, look, we do have to visit the past at times. We
Yes.
do have to look back at times. It doesn't mean we're going to camp out there because we're not. We are not
No,
camping out there. That's not even healthy. But in order to move forward, we often need to look back so that we can identify, become aware, be able to, we can't change the past, but we can change how it affects us.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Yes. So they have high expectations. Their expectations are extremely high. We
Mhm.
could do a whole segment just on unrealistic expectations, but we are going to talk, if we get a chance, we are going to talk about high expectations just a little bit after we get through these six. The soloist. Yeah, I know a lot about this one.
Me too.
This one is the one who prefers to work alone. They feel they need to accomplish tasks on their own. They're hesitant in seeking help. They think seeking help will reveal their fraudulence. Like they feel like if they ask for help, it's going to show that they're a fraud. Like, no,
For
that's not
me, asking
true.
for help kind of makes me feel more like I'm showing my vulnerability,
Yes. Oh,
not my,
yes.
yeah, not being a fraud, but my vulnerability. And sometimes it's scary to be vulnerable and it's scary
Oh,
to let that out there. And so something it's easier to just try to do it by yourself than it is for you to ask for help because then you're saying in an essence you're weak when you're really not. It's
mm-mm.
just, we need to let others help us and ask for help because that's how we're going to grow.
Absolutely. And when I think of this, what I think of is that we often we don't like to be vulnerable because we fear the unknown more than anything else. And
Yes.
so when we are vulnerable, we don't know what might come our way by exposing
Mhm.
ourselves, letting people see the raw realness of ourselves. And so it's true that when we ask for help, we're stepping out there and we don't know if someone's going to reject us and say no. We don't know if, and we can play in our head that that's what they're going to do. They're going to reject us. They're going to say no. And then here I am again, rejected. And so
Mhm.
when we step out in the unknown, it's that big hairy monster when in fact
Yes.
it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be. Being vulnerable, at some point we have to learn to be vulnerable, which means we're going to have to overcome even a little bit of a degree of the fear of the unknown.
Yes. It's true. You
So
have to be
it's
vulnerable and ask for help
ask for help.
because we
Please,
all we all need it for something. We really
please,
do.
please ask for help. Ask
Yes.
for help.
Yes.
Step out there. I
Exactly.
know people have rejected you in the past. I know that maybe people have thrown you aside or you felt devalued or not important. But please, please, if you're listening to my voice, ask for help because things cannot move forward. You're too much in yourself
Mhm.
that things will not move forward for you. You will not find that joy that you really want and that freedom that you really want if you allow yourself to stay stuck where you are. Ask for help.
Yes.
There may be people who say no. Maybe some people don't have time, but push through that. Don't look at it as a personal rejection. Look at it as, oh, they must be busy. Okay, well, who else? And maybe they're not the right person for you.
Absolutely.
Maybe they're not the right person to help you. So try not to take it personal and push through that and look for the next person. Pray and ask God to bring that person to you because they're out there. They're waiting for you and they have exactly what you need from them.
Yes.
But try not to allow yourself to be stuck deep inside yourself where you don't ever ask for help. Moving on.
Mhm.
All right. With their they also have internal pressure. They put immense pressure on themselves to manage everything. They are very guarded, very guarded. They are not very forthcoming about their struggles. That they keep them internalized. Oh
Yes.
man, that's dangerous. And I really want to touch on this one if we have time because it's like, woof. I picked one out of each one that I'm like, man, we're gonna have so much fun with this. So even if we don't have time today, we'll make sure we come back to it at some point. But the expert. So now we have the expert, and the expert constantly seeking for more information. Like they're the ones that constantly go to school. They get the next degree, the next self development stuff. They're always reading, but it doesn't necessarily mean they use what they read. It's having the information makes them feel good.
Good. Hmm.
They want to be the expert, they want to have all the answers.
But what good is being the expert if you're not utilizing it? So that's the whole thing. You need to, yes, if you want to be the expert, but then put those into action.
Exactly. And don't overdo it. Like you don't
No.
have to be an expert in everything. That's exhausting.
Yes.
That's exhausting. They devalue their experience. So they may have experience, they may have used some things that they've read in books or gone through a workshop or whatever, but then they devalue their experience like it doesn't really mean anything. And it's
Yes.
like it's no, don't do that. What the experience that you have, and Debbie, let's just stop for a second here because I feel this coming on. I often have women who have been through some really hard stuff that they have experience. They've worked through some things,
Hmm.
but they downplay what that experience, how much that experience really can help someone else. They'll say, "Oh, it's really nothing." And the reason that this happens is because they're comparing themselves to somebody else. And I have to
Yes.
tell them, "Look, please don't compare yourself to someone else. The what you've been through was hard. It was hard. And the things that you've learned along the way as you're climbing up out of that pit, that's experience. And
Yes.
that experience, there are other people out there that need to hear that. They are waiting for you to share your experience. So if you're always downplaying your experience, guess what? They're not going to get the wisdom that you have
Right.
from your own experience. So be careful. Look at yourself and ask yourself, do I downplay my experience? And if so, look at why are you doing it and or what's causing that, because Debbie and I are about what's causing that, and are you comparing yourself to other people? And if you are, Coach Pamsky is going to say, don't compare yourself to anyone else because there's nobody else like you. You are special. You are worthy. You're beautiful. You've got things that nobody else has. Use your experience and don't downplay it.
Yeah. And I'm going to say, exactly what you said. Nobody can be you. You are you. And I say I'm perfectly imperfect. And
Yes.
that's how I view myself. I'm perfectly imperfect because guess what? I do make mistakes. I do have my trials and my tribulations. But at the end of the day, I'm perfectly imperfect and I'm a work in progress and I'm going to go and succeed.
That's so beautiful. I love that. Love that. Yes. And the other thing is that they can be very impatient with beginners.
Hmm.
This is a good one. They might be intolerant or impatient, critical of people who are beginning to learn something.
Hmm.
And I have, so this is something that I'm pretty big about within myself. And then I teach my women this, and that is that we need to stop expecting people to be where we are. If you have learned a lot and you have this experience, you can't expect people to be where you are. Remember, and this is what I do with myself, remember where you came from. Remember what it was like to be at the beginning where you're just rising, starting to rise up out, and everything is new. You don't understand certain terms, you don't understand certain things. Maybe you are slower at processing things, especially when you're coming out of trauma, because trauma makes your brain, it's like you live in this cave and your brain just can't process very well.
Right.
And so we have to be patient with others because that's where they're at, and don't expect them to be where you are, because we talk about empathy and we talk about coming alongside of people. This is the best way you can come alongside what someone is by remembering where you came from, what it was like for you, what did you feel, how hard was it for you to process, and that helps you be able to have grace and mercy on other people.
Yes.
So incredibly important.
Yes, you have to meet people where they are. So when you have a 5-year-old, are you going to give a 5-year-old the same instructions you might give a 10-year-old that might be for the same activity? No, you're not.
No
So you
way.
have to learn to meet people where they are, and remember you were there once too, but you have gone so far, but now you want to bring them with you. So you're going to have to stay with where they are and bring them up with you, and that's the goal.
Here's the other thing about helping people and being there for others, because there are a lot of people who have a heart to help other people, but they may not just have maybe some experience or knowledge. And one of the things is that as you were speaking, I'm picturing this. So you have your 5-year-old. Are you going to grab your 5-year-old and drag them and they skin up their knees and elbows and they're crying? No, you're not going to do that. You're going to stop, get down to their level and talk to them and explain to them, okay, this is why we need to do this,
Mhm.
and I'm going to try to be patient with you, but this is something that you do need to go through. I think what we try to do is drag people through things when sometimes they need to do it on their own time, and we're
Yes.
not God. We don't always
Mhm.
know what needs to be in place, and he does. So sometimes it's a time factor that something else needs to happen first, and then they'll be ready. And when they're ready, man, they'll fly, like they will do it. But we
Absolutely.
we have to have grace and mercy on people and not drag them, because guess what, we're not the ones that are actually going to heal them.
Nope.
We're not going to be the ones. Maybe God uses our mouth and our hands, but it's still God who is going to take them on that healing journey. And so we need to step aside and let God be God and stop trying to take over.
Yeah, and nobody can heal themselves but themselves. So you can tell somebody everything that's wrong with them, but until they see it and they're ready to become better and to advance themselves and to grow, there's not anything anyone's going to tell them that's going to make them change. They have to decide that for themselves.
Absolutely, absolutely. All right, so let's get into the last one because our time is starting to tick
Tick down.
away. I know we're getting to the end of it. And the last one is the multifaceted. And that is where you experience all of them. Like you
Mhm.
can relate to every single one of the imposter profiles.
Yes.
And I want to say it's going to be really hard to not feel shame when you see that you have all of them, because you begin to beat yourself up. You have that, wow, am I really that bad? No, no, it just means that you've experienced some things and you can relate to all of them. And here's what I want to say to that. Instead of looking at having the multifaceted imposter syndrome as being something bad, you could actually turn that around and look at it as something good, because it means that you can relate to more people
Mhm.
than some.
Yes.
You understand what it means to try to do things yourself. You know what it means to want validation from other people. You know what it means to be the one who has to have it perfect.
Mhm.
And that, yes, will you have to work through those things? Absolutely. But you are going to be able to relate to people in a way that a lot of people can't.
Yeah.
So instead of beating yourself up, celebrate a little bit. Celebrate a little bit that you have way more experience than a lot of people, which means you're going to be able to relate and have empathy for other people more than most people can.
Yes, because I know myself, I can identify with everything that we've talked about. There's a little bit of everything in me, and that's why I say I'm perfectly imperfect.
Yep.
And then when I notice that something is maybe kind of standing out a little bit more, then I try to face that. And I try to say, well, what is making me feel this way? And
Absolutely.
that is where the growth happens.
Phew. Yes, that's where the growth happens. And so, again, if you want to take the imposter syndrome quiz, it's called Imposter Within. Take it. We'll try to put the link in somewhere for you to be able to do that, and start being more aware of which one of these do you identify so that you can start work through some of them and it will not affect you. We're obviously not going to get into a whole now how it affects you or what you can do about it, but we'll come back to this to make sure that you come back. But next week we are going to be talking about imposter syndrome in moms.
I'm so
So
excited.
if I know I'm excited about this. If you are a mom, you're going to want to be here because we're going to have some really good things for you to help you along the way.
Yes.
Alrighty, until next time, it's time to thrive while alive. Bye bye.
Bye.